بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا فمن يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله ثم أما بعد. We want to continue talking about practical, easy to implement, spiritual, although that word is extremely problematic, right? That word almost creates this separation between the material and the spiritual. And we're saying this does not have anything to do with the material. This does not have anything to do with the practical, but rather this is for the spiritual. That is not a demarcation that is at home within the religious tradition of Islam. We see all of life as essentially a spiritual endeavor, but we do have practical concerns. We have, practical responsibilities, and we want to mind those as we attempt to refine ourselves within our religious practice and our relationship with our Creator. But if we're going to use plain language, we would say spiritual advice, right? And today we begin by reflecting on the preciousness of sight. How precious your sight is to you. Subhanallah, when I was studying in Egypt, I encountered a man named Sheikh Sayyid Hamid Mahmoud. He was a teacher of Quran, and someone introduced me to him because they heard me reciting Quran, and they said, "You really need a teacher." They heard me reciting Quran. They said, you need a teacher. And a good brother named Sheikh Ali Walid from Canada, from Montreal, introduced me to Sheikh Sayyid. Now, he did not tell me, he did not forewarn me that Sheikh Sayyid was Kafif al-Basr. Sheikh Sayyid was blind. So when we went and we sat with him, I was amazed at the fact that not only was he a hafiz of the Quran, somebody that had committed the entire Quran to memory, he recited the Quran in 10 different styles of recitation, and he was a scholar of the Arabic language. And I remember sitting with him, it was terrifying because his ears were like sonar, right? You would read to him, and sometimes it felt like the only word he knew in English was no. You would say something, no. Iftah bo'ak, open your, I can hear him like it's like yesterday. Open your mouth. Americans have such lazy tongues. He was really a phenomenal person. Sometimes, if I really wanted to see him, and he lived in Hussein. He lived in Darasa, which was an area of Cairo. And if I really wanted to see him, sometimes with my bad manners, I would just show up at his door unannounced. I wouldn't call. I would just knock on the door. And he would amazingly open the door and say, "Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh Ubaydullah." He'd say, "Assalamu alaikum, Ubaydullah." And I always wanted to know, how does he know that it's me, right? And so one day I asked him, I said, "Sheikh, I come, I knock on the door. I don't tell you I'm coming. How do you know it's me?" And he knows that Americans, Brits, we want to spiritually sensationalize everything. So I was thinking, does he have some kind of secret? Is God telling him? Are the angels telling him? Does he have some kind of sixth sense? What is it? And so he played into it and built the suspense. You really want to know how I know? You really want to know? I really want to know. okay, I'll tell you. And I was like, oh my God, he's gonna reveal some, impenetrable spiritual secret to me. He said, everybody who comes up my stairs ascends the staircase with a distinct gait. You do 2 steps very quickly, then the next 3 steps you take more slowly, and then the last 2 you do very quickly. And then you knock, boom, 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 boom. He says, I know how each person who visits me comes up the stairs, and I know how they knock. I was like, subhanallah. This is what they call in Arabic, fuqdan al-hasa, a person that has lost a sense so that the other senses have become heightened. The other senses are heightened because he's lost the ability to see. Where Sheikh Sayyid lived, this has nothing to do with the class, by the way. I'm just telling you some Sheikh Sayyid stories. Just breaking the ice. I haven't seen you in a while. I'm just attempting to regale you with some stories of someone that I love. Sheikh Sayyid lived in an area that had no paved sidewalks. In fact, he lived in an area that some people would refer to as a slum. I wouldn't refer to it as a slum because he lived there. And he was like royalty to me. He was my teacher of Quran. So anywhere that he lived, as far as I'm concerned, it was like a principality, right? But whenever I would go to visit him, if I was wearing nice shoes, I would take off my shoes, put them in the bag, take out some old shoes, put those shoes on, and then I would walk through his village. And this was the strangest thing to the people in the village. It got so bad that when I would get off the bus and I would get to the edge of their village where the mud was, the kids would gather and say, look, watch this. He's about to change shoes. Watch this. Watch this. Look, watch this. And I would go into my bag. I would put on my old shoes. I would take off my loafers and put them in my bag and then walk. One day, Sheikh Sayyid said, Ustaz Ubaydullah, I want to ask you something, but I don't want you to get angry at me. And I'm like, what is it? People in my neighborhood, they're saying some very strange things about you. Right? I'm like, oh no, I'm thinking, what did I do? I'm like, they say that you walk around with a separate pair of shoes in your bag and that you put them on right before you come into our neighborhood. I was like, Sheikh, I do this. He said, Al-Amrikiyun akthar an-nas rafahiyya. He said, Americans are the most pampered of people. He says, what does somebody that has more money than you do? They walk around with what, a whole wardrobe? Right? He just found that so fascinating. Like, you have so much money that you walk around with extra clothes and you change into them at different times of the day. Wallahi, America, balad ghariba. America is a strange place, right? But the reason I mentioned Sheikh Sayyid is because in this hikmah, in the wisdom that we're covering today, the Sheikh said, إِذَا تَرْمُضُ عَيْنُكْ تُعَالِجُهَا. If one of us had an illness in his or her eye, we would rush to cure that illness. We would rush to treat that illness. He said, you know why? Because with your eye, you perceive all of the beauty of this world. It is with your eyes that you are able to see everything that delights you. And you know that were you to lose your ability to perceive those delights, it would be absolutely crushing. And I think about that all the time. That Sheikh Sayyid was born unable to see. I think, subhanAllah, he's never in his life witnessed a sunrise. He's never seen that before. He's never seen a sunset. He has never seen the faces of his own children. He had a son named Muhammad. And he had a daughter, I believe, named Asiya or Aisha. He had a son named Muhammad. And, one day, Sheikh Sayyid had a bookshelf. And I'll tell you, you talk about character. On his bookshelf, you saw flattened cereal boxes with rubber bands, large rubber bands around them, stuffed on the bookshelf. And I thought to myself, okay, I know that is a cereal box. Why is he keeping it on a bookshelf? Is he recycling? Or, I was too afraid to ask him, like, why do you have cereal boxes on your bookshelf? And then one day I came to class early. I saw something that when I think about it, it moves me almost to tears. His son Muhammad was reading to him from a book. What was this? It was a book of tafsir. I forget which book, a book of explaining the Quran. And he was punching into the cereal boxes in Braille, everything that Muhammad was reading, right? Muhammad would read and Sheikh Sayyid would transcribe what Muhammad was reading in Braille, right? And the cereal boxes were cardstock, so they were thick. And this is how he would keep the book. And I said, if Muhammad already read the book to you, why are you transcribing it in Braille? He said, for other blind people, I want them to have the gift of knowledge. I said, subhanAllah, these are people of tremendous character. So he had huge, there were like huge bookshelves in his home that were just filled up with cereal boxes. But each of those boxes contained like books that he would transcribe with his own hand that his son would read to him. But I was thinking, Sheikh Sayyid, he never even saw his son's face. He's never seen his son's face. He's never seen the face of his wife. If one of us had an ailment in our eye, we would rush to treat it. But then the Sheikh says, but maybe taramudu basiratuk 40 sana. Maybe you have spiritual blindness that you're afflicted with for 40 years and you don't rush to treat it at all. And it is through your spiritual insight that you are able to perceive, able to witness those delights of the spirit. In the same way that you witness those physical delights with your eye, a sunrise, a sunset, the face of someone that you love, a beautiful building, a rose, a tulip, right? The delights of the world that we perceive with our eyes. He said, likewise, there are wonders in the world of the spirit. Wonders. We were talking about this yesterday. There are wonders in the world of the spirit, but we might be afflicted with a kind of blindness, spiritual blindness, that prevents us from being able to see those wonders. The question that the Sheikh is raising, why don't we rush with the same urgency to treat that spiritual blindness that we would display if we needed to treat the blindness of our physical eye? We were talking yesterday, and subhanAllah, I didn't plan on doing this, but it just happened. And somebody with us yesterday was talking about a spiritual experience they had listening to the Quran. That they were listening to the Quran and they had a spiritual experience. And they said it was real. It was amazing. It was real. This really happened to them. And I said, you know what that reminds me of? That reminds me of this time that I was in Los Angeles. And I was attending a fundraiser at the home of a wealthy donor to an Islamic organization. And it was in Ranchos Palos Verdes. And the house was on a steep grade. It was like the house, it wasn't quite a mountain, but it was like an elevated plateau. And when you went into the backyard was huge. If you walked all the way to the gate and you looked over, you were looking right there at the Pacific Ocean. Like the backyard was just above the Pacific Ocean. And I went out and I had like a lemonade in my hand or something like that. And I was looking at the ocean and I thought, think of something profound. You're looking at the ocean, right? I was holding my glass and I was looking at the ocean. And as I was looking at the ocean, a dolphin came out of the water, went back into the water and kept swimming. And as a Midwesterner, I was shocked. I was like, that's a dolphin. And somebody from Los Angeles said, it's the ocean. What did you think was in there? It's the ocean. What did you think was in there? It's the ocean. And I said, you're right. One of our mashayikh, I was telling him this story. And he said, this is what those spiritual realities, sometimes they appear before our eyes very quickly, just like that dolphin. Whoa, did you feel that? Did you see that? But then you will talk to people that regularly swim in the ocean or regularly observe the ocean, and they will tell you, if you stand by the sea long enough, you'll see things like that all the time. That's nothing, right? Somebody told me once I saw an orca. What? I said, that's nothing, right? This is how we are with those ajaib, those wondrous signs of the spirit. We're like me, a Midwesterner standing at the ocean, something jumps out. Whoa, did you see that? But another person that is always there will tell you, oh man, if you come closer to the ocean, if you familiarize yourself with the ocean, you'll see even greater wonders than that. You'll see things that make that dolphin seem commonplace, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, everything in creation is engaged in the tasbih, is glorifying God. Everything in creation is glorifying God, but you do not understand its glorification. You don't understand how the birds are glorifying God. You don't understand how the mountains and the hills are glorifying God. You don't understand how the insects are glorifying God. You don't understand it, but everything in creation is glorifying God. Everything. And there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that the Prophet ﷺ picked up some rocks and he summoned some of the Sahaba. And the Sahaba said they could hear the rocks glorifying God. And this is actually a rigorously authenticated hadith. This is no make-believe. Every commentator says the amazing thing was not the rocks glorifying God. That's established by the Quran. The amazing thing was that they were allowed to hear the glorification of the rocks. This was an indication of where they were. That's what made it miraculous, that they could hear it, that they could perceive it. Here, now, Bismillah. Here, Ibn Ta'ala is saying, if we couldn't see with our physical eye, all of us would feel as though this is an ailment in need of urgent treatment. But when we find that we're unable to perceive with the eye of the heart, one is basar, the other is basira. Basar is the seeing of the physical eye. Basira, I guess we would translate it as insight, right? Being able to see with the eye of your Arabic and your English gets mixed up. Being able to see with the eye of the spirit, being able to see with the eye of the spirit, right? Being able to see with that. If you find that you're unable to see with that eye, then rush to treat that blindness. You know, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said in an authentic hadith, "Ittaqi basirat al-mu'min فإنه ينظر بنور الله." Fear the insight of the believer because she sees with the light of God. Fear the insight of the believer because he sees with the light of God. I was talking to our brother, Sheikh Ahmed Arafat from Bridgeview, and he was talking about worshiping Allah, and he was talking about living ma'Allah, with God, lillah, for God, and billah, again, with God. And I said, what's the difference? And he says, when you are living billah, with God, everything you see reminds you of God. Everything that you experience affirms for you God's presence because you are with God. This is the kind of insight that we should want. That everything, all of my experiences, they all go back to God. Everything that I behold, they all remind me. I want to direct your attention to something, a very powerful analogy that Ibn Ata'illah, whose book Taj al-Arus we're reading, he says, if you have wasted your time, and time, brothers and sisters, is the most precious thing any of us possess. We all know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "Wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr." Imam Shafi'i famously, radiyallahu anhu, he famously said, if God had only revealed this, that by the passage of time, all human beings are in a state of perpetual loss, this would have been enough as guidance, because this is something that is indisputably true. It's indisputably true. And the word that God uses for time in this ayah is asr. You know, the word asr in Arabic means that which squeezes. Right? There's a lot of words for time in Arabic. Waqt, dahr, and there's a lot of words for time. But asr particularly refers to that time that squeezes, because all of us feel the constraint, we feel the consternation of our mortality. And it's something that is undeniable. So here Ibn Ata'illah is saying, if you have wasted your time, and time spent in other than the obedience of God is time wasted. God tells us, إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلَ الصَّالِحَاتِ, except for those who believe and do righteous deeds. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ, and they come together to enjoin each other to truth and to enjoin each other to patience. That other than those things, everything else we're doing is a waste of time. This is the only way that we can make our days, make our minutes, make our hours, make our seconds count. To believe, to perform acts of righteousness, right? To do good deeds. It's good, man. I haven't seen you in years, man. You make me just seeing your beautiful face. I just stopped the dars, mashallah. To do good deeds, to come together, to enjoin or to encourage truth, to support truth, and to come together to encourage each other to be patient. This is the only way that you can make use of time. Other than that, time is getting away from you. You know, I'm old now, man. I know I don't look like it. We know black don't crack. I'm old now. And when people ask me, yo, man, what's the what's the strangest part of being 40? Your brother Ubaydullah, I'm 40. Huh? Ameen, ya Rabbal Alameen. In good health and obedience, inshallah. Ameen. I never respond with the things that people expect me to respond with. Like, oh, I wake up and my knee just hurts for no reason. Or it's so many people I know are experiencing deaths in their family. Didn't seem like that when I was younger. Now, every time I turn around, somebody's parents are passing away. Someone's grandparents are passing away. Entertainers that I knew, people whose work I was fond of, artists that I knew are passing away. Wasn't like, see, when I was younger, artists that my mother knew were passing away. People whose work she was fond of, they were passing away. Civil rights icons that she knew, they were passing away. Now, all of the people that I know are passing away. And it just gives you this strange awareness of the temporality of life. It's a really weird feeling. So when I read, wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr, by the passage of time, all human beings are in a state of perpetual loss. It just hits different now, man. I became Muslim when I was a teenager. And I would read this verse. That was one of the first chapters of the Quran that I memorized because it's short, very easy to, and the mic just won't cooperate today. It's short, it's easy to memorize. I would read it all. Wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr. Just didn't hit. Something about now is wal asr, innal insana lafi khusr. And Ibn Ta'ala is saying, if you have wasted your time, then it only stands to reason that you would recognize the preciousness of what time you have left. Subhanallah. And then he gives a very powerful analogy. This is one of those analogies that if you've seen this before, it shakes you. He said, imagine a woman that had 10 children. If 9 of them passed away, if she survived 9 of her children, how do you think she would feel about the one that survived, the one that remained? Right? She would just, think about like the outpour of love and attention and consideration. Like, I've lost 9 of my children. This is the one child that I have remaining. What wouldn't she give to that child? What wouldn't she do for that child? How would she value that child? He said, this is how we should feel about the time that we have remaining, right? If we know, look, I've wasted some of my time, right? I've spent time that I cannot get back. In the Arabic language, Arabic is a beautiful language. The word for breath is nafas. Nafas. It comes from the same root as nafis, for something to be precious. Every breath you take is precious. Why? Because it's irreplaceable. You can't get it back. Once it goes, it's gone. Every hour, once it goes, it's gone. Every day, once it goes, it's gone. So if you know, man, I've wasted some of my time, how much more value should you feel, should you sense toward the time that you have remaining? And then he says something very powerful. He says, this recognition is a second birth. Wow, I said, Christians did not invent the term born again. When you recognize my time is precious, I have to make use of it, you're born again. Your life has just started. When you recognize that, this is when your life starts. Your life starts now. You're alive. You're alive. Because if you are using your time for other than the remembrance of God, the dhikr of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're not alive. And this is not Ubaydullah's interpolation. The Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, the difference between the person that remembers God and the person that does not remember God is the same as the difference between the living and the dead. Right? So let us turn toward the time we have remaining with great intentionality. This does not mean that, we can't laugh, that we can't have a good time. No, all of this is essential for preserving prophetic balance. But let us recognize the preciousness of our lives and of our time. When you wake up in the morning, man, subhanAllah, I was sitting with, mashallah, the blessed and erudite Sheikh Ahmed Saad that came to visit us last week. And he was telling a story about Charles Lagai Eaton, a British diplomat that embraced Islam. And Charles Lagai Eaton is quoted, Sheikh Ahmed at least said that when he turned, I think 90 something, it was like he could feel the angel of death right at the tip of his nose. My wife's grandmother will be 102 in July, inshallah. Atalallahu umraha. Right? And sometimes when I look at her, right, you just see someone that is unafraid of meeting God. She's not afraid at all. Right? Speaks very candidly about it. And every time I think this is remarkable, I say, well, if you're 101, perhaps it's something you have to get accustomed to. Perhaps it's something you have to get accustomed to. But one of the things that I think about, I say, if I was that old, every time I open my eyes in the morning, I think I would look around the room and try to see something familiar because I don't know what I'm opening my eyes to. Right? I think I would open my eyes and go, okay, there's my alarm clock. Because you just don't, those eyes, you're 101, those eyes open. Right? You see something, if you don't see anything familiar, it's happened. You open your, I imagine that would be the worst practical joke you could do to somebody that old. Is like change the room while they're asleep or something like that. Like you change the room because I imagine they open their eyes. It's like, right? Because I imagine you go to sleep every night on eggshells. You're like, in any moment now. I mean, I'm 101. Any moment now, right? But when you open your eyes and you see something familiar, know that you have the thing that everybody will want, which is just another day. Everybody. It is mentioned that for the people of Jannah, when they see the reward that God has given them, their only regret will be, if I would have known what God was going to give me, I would have done more. I wish I could go back because the $10 I gave in sadaqah, wallahi, I would make it 100. If I had ainul mashhada or ainul yaqeen, the certainty of seeing, now that I see the promise of God, I can see it. Maybe I would wake up and pray in the middle of the night a few times out of each month. I would do it every day. If I could see this, send me back. And the people that are being punished, they have the same wish. Although their wish is, send me back so that I can correct everything that I was mistaken about. So when you wake up in the morning, this is the preciousness of your time. You have the thing that everybody is going to want, just another day to worship God. Another day to worship God. So as we close and we open for questions, comments, my only advice for you today, see your time as precious. Don't fritter it away. Don't waste it. Don't treat it as something insignificant, right? Think about that analogy. If a woman had 10 children and she lost 9 of them, how would she feel about the one remaining child? That is how we should feel about what remains of our lives. This is the time that I have left. No time to waste, no time to play. I mean, figuratively speaking, playing is a part of the sunnah. Knowing when to play and how to play. But I mean, I'm intentional about what remains of my life. Right? I see the value of what remains of my life. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.